everybody, JC here with another TNI toy review. And we're just getting back from the New York Toy Fair, and we're going to take a look at the new Game of Thrones Legacy Collection 6-inch Daenerys Targaryen figure. Now this is the third figure we've looked at in this new Funko line of 6-inch figures based on the Game of Thrones series that airs on HBO. Previously, before Toy Fair, we took a look at the Jon Snow figure and the Ned Stark figure. And so far the line's kind of gotten mixed reviews. I really like the Jon Snow figure, but the Ned Stark figure I was a little disappointed in. But today, as I said, we're going to look at Daenerys Targaryen, as she's known as the Mother of Dragons in the series. Now, these figures come in packaging that's very reminiscent to me of what we see with Hasbro 6-inch, the Black Series. They're a little more colorful. Each figure has different colors, I guess, to kind of match the character's personality, kind of like we see with the DC Collectibles line. This particular figure has red and black borders. But each figure is displayed in this window type box packaging, so you can clearly see the figure displayed before you purchase it. Now these figures are right now only available at Barnes & Noble bookstores. They're going to be sold exclusively there for about 30 days, and then we'll start seeing them in other retail outlets. So anyway, back to the packaging. We've got the Game of Thrones Legacy Collection logo up at the top with the number 5. This is figure number 5 in the first wave. There's 6 figures total. Then below that we have the figure clearly displayed so you can see what you're getting. And then underneath that we have the family crest for the character. In this case it's dragons. With the name of the character down below, and then we have a little age restriction of 17 or older. Now, this is obviously a collector line. These figures cost about $20. I don't know if the age restriction is really in regards to the figures themselves though, or more towards the content of the TV series. There's nothing really terribly graphic or complex about the figures that your kids couldn't, younger kids couldn't play with, but you definitely wouldn't want them watching the TV show, I don't think. TV show is very graphic and lots of adult content there. So anyway, on the one side of the packaging we have another window, so you can not only see the figure from the front, but you can also see it from the side, and then below that you have the Funko logo. And then on the other side, you just have the Game of Thrones title, the dragon crest, and the name of the character. And then again, the Funko logo. On the back of the packaging, we get the Game of Thrones Legacy Collection logo up at the top. And then on the left-hand side, we get a picture from the actual TV series of the character. And then on the right side, we have the names of all the figures, all 6 figures in the first series. And then below that, we have the name of this particular figure. And then below that, we have the HBO logo, the Gentle Giant Studios logo, and the Funko logo. Funko teamed up with Gentle Giant to make these Game of Thrones figures. Okay, so let's get the figure open and take a look at what's inside. Okay, so here's a look at the figure outside of the packaging. She's displayed here with her one accessory that she comes with, which is one of her dragons. As I mentioned before, in the TV series she's known as the Mother of Dragons, which basically is because she pals around with 3 newborn dragons, which are really the last of remaining dragons on the planet. So the figure itself, I think, has some nice detailing with the sculpt. I really like, the details on the hair. We'll take the dragon off here. We'll get back to that in just a minute. But I really like the detailings with like the braids and everything in the hair. There's some nice paint washes in the hair to give it some added detail. In the series, the actress has really, really light blonde hair, almost kind of a whitish blonde. So I think they do a pretty good job of capturing that, but adding the washes in the hair to kind of give it the added detail. She has very light pigment skin tones, which I think is pretty accurate. Now one thing I want to note is that the paint on the skin is a little easy to chip, I found. You can see here on her arm she's got a little chips from when I've just been posing her around, so that's something you want to be wary of. She's got some nice sculpting detail on her tattered shirt. It's kind of a rough sculpt, kind of gives you a rough pattern sculpted in on the shirt, which is nice, and this has a kind of tattered look. She's got like the braided ropes going around her neck, keeping her shirt up, which is nice. It goes all the way around her neck and everything, underneath her hair. Again, though, you can see some kind of scratch marks on the skin tone where it's chipped a little bit. So she has these two holes on her left shoulder that you can see here. That's so that the dragon has little pegs on the bottom of its feet that will fit in there, so the dragon can sit on her shoulder. It's not too noticeable from looking at her from the front because the hair hides the holes, but you do, when you don't have the dragon sitting on her shoulder, you do notice the holes from the side. It's not a big deal, but I guess I like that the dragon can like sit on her shoulder, so it's a good trade-off. And like I said, you don't really notice the holes too much from the front because the hair hides it. Now the dragon itself, which as I said is the only accessory that this figure comes with, is made with a pretty soft plastic. It doesn't really, the wings, you can move them, but they don't really pose. They just kind of go back into the same position. And in fact, you would probably want to be careful because they look like if you tried to move them around a lot, you could break them off pretty easily. They're attached with a pretty thin piece of plastic to the body. Same with the tail, though the tail seems a better attached. The tail doesn't really feel like it's going to break off, but there's no real posability. You can move the tail, but it just kind of goes back into the same position as before. It's just a long, thin piece of plastic, but there's no kind of articulation or anything with the tail. The dragon itself, though, is very small. As I said, this is, each season the dragons get a little bigger in the show, but this is basically right after they were hatched out of the eggs. So the dragon itself is pretty small. You've got some nice detailing on the head sculpt. Even though the head's really tiny, they did get some nice detailing, and it's got little red eyes. And then the wings themselves are pretty nicely sculpted. So I like the look of the dragon. Now the only thing I want to caution about the dragon is his legs. As I mentioned, he's got these little pegs on the bottom of his legs, but the legs themselves are very soft plastic. So when you go and you try and put the legs in the holes, you have to be careful because the legs have a tendency to just kind of bend when you try and push them into the hole. So you really kind of got to use both fingers to get it to stick in there. Scale-wise, I think the figure is pretty good. She's not as tall as the other two figures we've looked at in the series. In fact, I think she's the smallest figure in the first wave. Well, no, I take that back. Tyrion is probably the smallest. But as a female character, she is not as tall as all the other male characters in the first wave. She stands probably just about 5 1/4 inches tall. So here she is next to the Jon Snow figure and the Ned Stark figure. So you can see both of those are taller. And though we haven't actually seen her on screen with either of these characters, I'm going to assume that she would be shorter than them. And just for an additional scale comparison, here she is next to the Star Wars 6-inch Black Series Slave Leia figure. You can see they're about the same size. So, again, for female characters, they're both shorter than their male counterparts in the line. So for articulation on this particular figure, it's kind of a mixed bag. I do like the articulation that they've given this figure. It's more on par with the Jon Snow figure. I was a little disappointed with the Ned Stark figure because it had reduced articulation. So this one has, pretty much the same articulation. In fact, a little bit more because it's got ball joints at the wrist that give you pivoting at the wrist. My problem with the articulation on this one, though, is that the joints are very loose. I mean, right out of the package, they started off very loose, especially at the ankles and the midsection. And the midsection is basically just attached with a ball joint, just like with the Jon Snow figure. So the problem is when you're trying to pose her around, especially if you're trying to pose her, bending her at the midsection and stuff, it has a real tendency to just pop off, which becomes very annoying. You may see her pop off multiple times as I'm moving around in this video. So to me, that's kind of a drawback. Otherwise, I like the articulation. She does have a good range of movement. I just wish the joints were a little bit tighter, and that joint at the middle was attached a little bit tighter so it didn't come off so easy. It's not so bad with the Jon Snow figure, but with this one, it's definitely kind of a pain in the butt. For the head articulation, the head's just attached with a ball joint, just like with the other figures. I haven't had any problem with the hair or anything. In fact, the hair is made with this soft, rubbery type material, so there's a lot of give in the hair, and it really doesn't prohibit her head movement too much. She can't look back very much because of the hair, but even still, she has some. She can look up some, and she can definitely look down nicely, and then she can turn her head left and right with no issues. So I really like how they've done the hair on this figure. And then the same with the arm movement. The arms are attached with standard ball hinge joints. And again, she has good range of movement. She can get her arms out, and she has good rotation there. And the hair, again, really does not prohibit her movement. You can just move the hair around so it doesn't prevent her from moving her arms around. So I really like that. She's got single joints at the elbows, but she has good bending at the elbow, plus she has the swivel at the elbow. And then, as I mentioned before, the wrists with this figure are attached with ball joints. They just pop off like that, and you can see the ball joint. So she has a good range of movement with the hand. She can bend it down and back, and it rotates. This is the first figure of the three I've looked at so far that I think is attached with a ball joint like that. The Ned Stark figure had hinge joints, which were actually very delicate, and then the Jon Snow figure just had swivel wrists, but this one's got the swivel and the pivot, which is nice. So then we have the midsection joint, which, as I said, you get good movement, assuming it stays attached. Good swivel. She can look down. It's definitely when you're trying to get her to look back where it has a tendency to kind of pop off like that. So that's my biggest complaint with the ball joint on this particular figure. I like how this joint works overall. I just think they need to make like the ball a little bit bigger so it doesn't just pop out so easily. And then the other thing I want to note, again, with the skin paint, where the figure is kind of moved around and rubbed against the skin, we see, in the waist section, the paint has kind of rubbed off. Now, it's not that big a deal in that area because when the upper body is attached, the shirt primarily covers that area, but that's just something I wanted to point out. So her legs are attached with ball joints, just like with the other figures. She can do the splits well. She's got these, leather skirt pieces, but again, they're very flexible and soft, so they don't terribly prohibit the movement of the legs. A little bit. They do restrict the movement a little bit. You kind of got to go out and forward if you want to move her legs forward. And then same with back. But overall, she has pretty good movement there at the waist section. She's got a swivel joint at the thigh, which again is pretty well hidden with the skirt piece. And then she's got the double jointed knees, so she's got good bending at the knees. And then she has the hinged pivot joints at the ankles, so she's got the ankle pivot and good movement there. But again, my only issue with this joint on this figure is it's very loose. Started off very loose, and so it has a tendency for the weight of the figure to kind of push it forward so it falls over easy. So as I mentioned before, we just got back from the New York Toy Fair where we got a look at the second series of Game of Thrones figures coming from Funko. Now we've had these pictures posted up on TNI, but thought I would just give you a brief, for those who haven't checked it out, a brief look at the second series of figures in this video. So just to recap, the second series will include a new Daenerys figure, so we're going to get a second version of this character. She's wearing her, what they're calling her Mother of Dragons outfit, which is an all-blue outfit. We're going to get the big Khal Drogo, the warrior who becomes Daenerys' husband in the series. We've got Jaime Lannister, also known as the Kingslayer, the oldest Lannister brother. Robb Stark, who's the oldest Stark brother. Arya, who's the youngest Stark daughter. And then Brianna, who's the very large bodyguard type character that we see in the series. Female bodyguard type character in the series. So that's a look at the second series and a look at the first series, Daenerys Targaryen, the Mother of Dragons. Overall, I think it's not a bad figure. I just, like I said, I wish the articulation was a little tighter on this one. But definitely, I think this is my second favorite out of the three I've looked at in the first series, with Ned Stark still being the worst of the bunch. But definitely, if you're Game of Thrones fans, I think you want to pick this one up. So that's my review. I hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, I'll catch you later.